We just have a quick question here from Amir asking us, what is the significance of bond auctions for currencies? Now, normally you guys will see in the terminal there is a few previews for upcoming bond auctions that we have from central banks. Now, first of all, thank you, Amir, for the question. So looking at bond auctions, it's fairly straightforward, really. It basically just means that the central bank is auctioning off some bonds in order to raise cash. Now, during these auctions, the central banks will take let's take the Federal Reserve, for example. They will announce that they are planning to auction certain bills or bonds, basically treasuries, with different maturities. So it might be a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 30 years, etc. And they will also announce how many of each they are making available at the auction. Now, the buyers, these are normally your investors, pension funds, hedge funds, or banks. They will put in their bids for how many of these offered bonds they would like to buy. Now, when the bids for bonds, basically how much people want to buy, are more than the actual offering, for example, the buyers wanted more than the Fed was auctioning off, this is usually referred to as an oversubscribed auction and is considered as a successful auction by the central bank. Now, when the bids are less than the actual offering, it's known as undersubscribed and is seen as an unsuccessful auction. Now, the reason why an oversubscribed auction is good or seen as successful is because more demand for bonds means higher prices for bonds being paid. And when the bond price rises, that pushes down the yield. So that means that the central bank will need to pay less or pay back less in interest on the bonds that they sell. Whereas an undersubscribed auction means that the bond demand will be low, which pushes down the price and increases the yield, which means the funding costs for those bonds are higher for the central bank. Now, how does this relate back to currencies? Well, if all the bonds on offer are basically sold and it's oversubscribed, it means that all the buyers of those bonds will need to actually buy US dollars in order to buy the bonds, which should be dollar positive as the actually exchange into dollars will obviously push the price for dollars up. And the opposite will be true for an undersubscribed auction. However, it doesn't always have an immediate effect on the relevant currency. The size of the auction is obviously also important, as a very big auction that gets sold out means that there will be more demand for US dollars. Now, during times when the money supply is already low, maybe in a thin liquidity environment like we saw in the dollar over a couple of weeks back, a very big oversubscription in a bond auction can have a bigger impact on the currency, but it's usually not something that we'll expect to see major moves in a currency from. But it is good to know that it is that there is auctions in play, as it might affect some short-term volatility in terms of the relevant currencies.